You know, there are some faces that are just so famous, you feel like you'd recognize them anywhere, right? But what happens if one day you don't? What if a face you've seen 1,000 times suddenly looks like a total stranger's? Well, that's the bizarre mystery at the very heart of a conspiracy that has the internet asking one really strange question. And yeah, we are talking about the Jim Carrey, the man whose face pretty much defined comedy for an entire generation. But lately, he's become the center of some really wild online speculation, and it all started with one public appearance that just felt off. Okay, let's break this down. So on the left, you've got that classic Jim Carrey we all know and love. And on the right, that's him at the Cesar Awards in Paris. The second this footage dropped, the internet just, well, it exploded. People were adamant that he was completely unrecognizable. And just like that, a massive conspiracy theory was born. So yeah, that appearance in Paris, it wasn't just a simple red carpet walk. For a whole lot of people online, it became the opening scene of a massive digital investigation. And this comment right here, man, it just perfectly captures the feeling. It's not just people thinking, oh, he looks a little different. No, this is a deep gut feeling of strangeness from the very people who grew up watching his movies. For them, this isn't just an opinion. It's an absolute certainty. And all that certainty has kind of branched out into three main theories. The most popular one, by far, is that he's been replaced by a clone or some kind of body double. Then you have others who think it's just the result of some really extensive plastic surgery. And finally, a smaller group just chalks it all up to, getting older. Let's dig into each of these. All right, let's get into the nitty-gritty, the so-called evidence that's fueling this whole debate. Online detectives have basically put together a whole case file of specific physical changes that they claim are just impossible to explain away. Okay, so the biggest piece of evidence for a lot of people, the one they just can't get over, it's his eyes. I mean, for his entire career, Jim Carrey has had these famously deep brown eyes. But in that Paris footage, they look shockingly blue or green or even gray. So theorists are asking a pretty simple question. How does a person's fundamental eye color just change like that?
And believe me, the rabbit hole goes way deeper. It isn't just about the color. People have zoomed right in on his eyes, analyzing how the stage lights reflect off them, and some have pointed out what they describe as this milky, almost cataract-like look in one eye. And that just adds another layer of mystery to the whole thing.
And it's not just the eyes. Nope. His entire facial structure has been put under the microscope. Theorists are pointing to what they see as a different jawline, teeth that have a totally new alignment, and even a subtle shift in the shape of his nose. For those who believe something is up, these aren't just small changes over time. They're proof that we're looking at a completely different person. Okay, so we've seen the evidence. Now, how are people interpreting it? This is where the story goes from just kind of weird to, well, something else entirely. So you've basically got three camps you can fall into. The replacement theory is, without a doubt, the most popular one online. Then there's the idea that he's had so much cosmetic work done that he's basically changed his own face beyond recognition. And then there's the third, most straightforward explanation. This is just what aging looks like for a guy in his 60s. And get this, the replacement theory, it actually has specific suspects. Some people have bizarrely suggested it's the actor James Woods. But more often, people point to impersonators like Heather Shaw, with some even claiming that she, a female comedian, now looks more like the classic Jim Carrey than the guy we saw in Paris. But that's the big question, right? If he was replaced, why? Every good conspiracy theory needs a motive. And this one has a very specific story about silencing a Hollywood truth teller. People who believe this theory, they point to a very specific time, right around 2017. This was the period when Carrey seemed to be publicly rejecting the whole Hollywood machine, giving these really strange philosophical and super critical interviews. I mean, who could forget this red carpet interview? This is what people point to as the real Jim Carrey, speaking his mind, all existential, totally dismissive of fame, and just sick of all the phoniness. It's a huge contrast to the guy in Paris who looked pretty happy to be playing the part of a movie star again. And this is the heart of the motive. The theory goes that Carrey started saying too much, that he started talking about secret symbols, the Illuminati, the dark side of the elite, basically setting himself up as a whistleblower who was about to expose everything. He even went so far as to call out the media directly, claiming they're just a government tool for distraction. For believers of this theory, that was the last straw. He was becoming too dangerous, too loud, and he needed to be silenced and replaced with someone who would just play the game. But, there's always another side to this story, right? So let's flip the coin and look at the more, well, let's just say the more down-to-earth explanations for all of this. So, the skeptics, they come in and pretty much break down all that evidence piece by piece. They argue that, yeah, eyes can actually lighten a bit over a lifetime, that our noses and ears literally never stop growing and changing shape as we get older. And things like inflammation, changes in weight, or even just some bad cosmetic fillers could easily explain the rest. To them, it's not a clone. It's just a guy in his 60s with longer hair.
And, a comment like this really brings things back down to earth. It's a great reminder that at the center of all this wild talk about clones and replacements and secret societies, there's a real person who's being picked apart and judged on a global scale.
So where does that leave us? What's the truth here? Is this some kind of sinister Hollywood plot to silence a whistleblower? Or is it just the natural and sometimes really surprising effect of time on a very, very famous face? We've laid out all the pieces of the puzzle. Now, the final verdict is really up to you.